Hello and welcome. At what point can a child be treated like an adult, especially when it comes to committing a crime? It's a controversial issue that Turkey is struggling with as it works to quell unrest in ethnic Kurdish areas. Following a series of demonstrations in 2006, Parliament amended its anti-terror code, allowing children to be brought before the country's toughest criminal court. Under the current law, those accused of participating in unauthorized demonstrations or spreading propaganda on behalf of banned groups face several years in prison. Known as the stone-throwing children, these Kurdish boys spend much of their days on the streets, and advocates say they simply get swept up in protests, unaware of the tough legal consequences. Kurdish community leaders argue that the boys have become easy targets for law enforcement looking to put down any display of Kurdish political identity. For the families, the results are devastating. Many of the boys suffer abuse in prison and come out as adults facing psychological issues. On today's show, we ask, are Turkey's terror laws wrongly targeting children in an effort to crack down on Kurdish political dissent? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send us an SMS or an email, and we'll also take your calls on the show. Joining me now from the southeastern city of Diyarbakir in Turkey is Serkan Akbas, an attorney who regularly handles cases coming before the country's heavy penalty courts, including a significant number of children charged with terror offences. Also joining me is Dr. Nazmi Gur, one of the founders of Turkey's Human Rights Association. Dr. Gur currently represents the Kurdish-dominated Peace and Democracy Party, or BDP, here in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, I welcome you both to the show.
Thank you.
Mr. Akbas, if I can start with you there in Diyarbakir and ask about your representing many of these children. I know that you end up in court having to try to defend many of them. Tell us what you see. What sort of cases involving youngsters end up in the courts there?
First of all, good evening to you and the people that are watching this tonight, the TV in front of their TVs. As an attorney at law, I'd like to draw attention to the trial process of these children, first of all, because there is an anti-terror law in force in Turkey now, and this makes a distinction between the crimes as a politically motivated or other crimes.
Right.
When it comes to politically motivated crimes, you are tried in the special courts. They are heavy penal courts. They were used to be state security courts, but with the new legislation in 2005, they were in 2001, they were replaced by special heavy penal courts.
Let me ask you, Mr. Akbas, what's different? What is different? Let me just ask you quickly, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know we have the satellite delay, but what is different about these courts? In what way do they work differently from the regular judicial courts?
Yes, if you are tried on the Terror Act, then your punishment do not get deferred and is increased by half. The imprisonment sentence is increased by half, and there are some other sanctions that they are applying as an outcome of sentence.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Nazmi Gur here, and thank you for joining us. Nice to speak with you again, actually. Isn't it the problem of the law just being too tough, in terms of that it's going after children, or is the problem in the way that the word terror is defined and happens to rope in these children because of that definition? Is it specifically targeted at the kids, or are they just a victim of the way the definition goes?
I think it's a problem of definition and the interpretation of the judges that narrowly interpret the law. It is not only the issue of law and how the laws are interpreted, but it's also a problem of Kurds, a Kurdish problem. As you know that many years there were southeast of Turkey is an area of conflict. People always demonstrated. But as you mentioned, just the beginning of the program, when there was a new amendment in the Turkish penal code as well as to the anti-terror law, that happened, and unfortunately up to now more than 3,000 children between age 15 and 18 are in prison now, and they face with imprisonment, long imprisonment terms.
Now, interesting, you know, what you raised about the Kurdish issue here, because we had an email from Cyprus, if I could put this to you, sir. It's from Petros Charalambos in Cyprus, who wrote in saying, if Turkish children get the same type of punishment and Kurdish children are not being discriminated against, then the law is fair. But you're saying it's targeted specifically at them. What impact has this legislation and its application had on the Kurdish communities?
Well, this is the law that really targeted not only children's, but as well as the population, Kurdish people. Since 30 years, there are lots of changes. As you know, that Turkey is a country negotiating with European Union to be a member of Europe. So there's a step back, a very important step back from democracy and targeted at population as well as the children's.
Let me bring in Sirkan Akbas here again. And sir, when you go into court to defend these children, when you're up there facing the courts, the heavy penal courts as you call them, what do you face in terms of the difficulties of trying to defend these children and these people who brought up in these courts? What is the attitude of the courts when it comes to dealing with these cases?
Yep. Now, as I said in the beginning, United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says that child must be treated differently from the adults. Now, and anyone under 18 is a child. Now, Turkey on the face accepts age of 18 as a threshold. Anyone under 18 is child, but divides them into three. Until 12 years old, you are not accountable for nothing. You are not getting tried. Between 12 and 15, if you have discretion, if you do understand the outcomes and the results of what you've done, then you are treated as someone between 15 and 18. That means if a psychologist decides that you did understand what you did, and when you threw a stone, you did understand that if you get caught, you will get 8 years or 12 years prison sentence,
right,
then you must be treated as an adult. The only difference is that when they get the sentence, when the imprisonment sentence, they decrease the sentence if you're under 18, but you are getting to the very same court as adults.
Right.
But if you commit some other crime, there are some special courts for the juveniles. And if you commit, say, burglary, yeah, you go to a different court, yeah, and you get special attention from the court and psychologist. But if there is a political crime, if what you have perpetrated is a political act,
right,
then you are not considered as a child.
It's interesting.
That's the difference. That's the thing that we are opposing to.
It's interesting you raised this. Let me put this to you. Actually, it's an email that came in. It's okay. Let me put this email from South Africa that came in from Nwachukwu Gideofor Obiezo, who says, some children do have criminal capacity and can understand the consequences of their actions. Each case has to be looked at separately. Now, you mentioned the psychological testing to see if these children can judge what is right and what is wrong. How much genuine protection is there for the children or for the juveniles through this testing? Does it genuinely give them a chance to prove their innocence?
I should mention how the practice is actually. When a child comes to the court, these heavy panel courts, the judge writes a note on a half size of a paper and sends this note to the psychologist. Please have an interview with the child and decide whether he is capable of understand what he or she has done.
Right.
And the psychologist or the social worker makes an interview or a small chat for 5 minutes. And after that, in most of the times they say, especially if they're just below under 15, most of the times they put a note saying that they understand what they have done and they have the discretion, and then they come to the court. And this is the practice. I can show you many verdicts, and then they are very recent. In the last 3 weeks, three children that I defended received imprisonment between 6 and 9 years. With only these not jotted down by a psychologist.
All right. It's interesting you mentioned that. Thank you for that example. We have a caller on the line from London. Charles, what would you like to ask?
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Pleasure. Go ahead.
Obviously, when kids commit these kinds of crimes, it depends on what sort of age they are for them to be subjected to the legal process. But as far as I can see, obviously, one would need to look at who are these kids operating for. They must have someone who is directing them to commit such crimes.
Okay, it's interesting you raised that, Charles. Let me quickly get this question to Dr. Nazmi Good, and I'll put it also with this question we had from Fozia Ayuba, who sent this in through Facebook, which touches on the same issue here. Fozia wrote in saying, these children are victims of circumstances and it is unfair to prosecute them. They should be questioned to get those who are using them. And this is what Charles was getting at. Who is responsible? Who's behind this? Because I think sometimes they just happen to be in locations where they may get roped into a demonstration. They may not really fully realize the consequences. Who should be held accountable?
Well, this is a short list of those children. Their age is between 13. There are some names here that 13 to 18. And nothing is behind them. No one is behind them. The people are demonstrating for their rights, for democracy. If you accept Turkey as a democratic country, there must be freedom of expression, freedom of demonstration.
Sorry, Dr. Good, I was going to say then quickly before we take the break, if there are these sort of young ages, 13, 14, 15, then surely parents or someone, some sort of guardian must have some kind of say in trying to encourage them or discourage them from going into demonstrations and encouraging them perhaps to stay away from the police front lines and the kind of demonstrations where they get...
You're right, but here many children arrested in prison just after Newroz celebration. Newroz is a national day of Kurds that celebrate Newroz every year, and when the police attacking the people, the children just run away from the streets and they throw the stones only to the police. So they arrested and they put in the jail and they took them into heavy penal code and treat them as terrorists.
I gather there have been some I gather there have been some bizarre cases. Well, we'll get onto some of those in a moment. We're taking a very short break here. More of our discussion in a moment when we return.